this is a reaction to a podcast, Redefining Energy. They had a professor from Copenhagen on. He just wrote a book, How Big Projects Get Done. And I think it's one of those things that you might think that, well, what's the big deal? What is this? And then you listen to the guy and you read some of the stuff that he's written and you realize, I mean, this is the key to some of the most important questions that investors have, and I would say even more dramatically that civilization has. So this professor, whose job is to collect data and analyze the completion of big projects and answer some of the most fundamental questions, such as why do some projects fail and others don't? This particular endeavor, in my opinion, is a key to answering the question, what is actually wealth creation? How is wealth created? Because the parallels between large projects and wealth creation are right in front of your face. If you want to build, let's say, a large hydro dam or a nuclear power plant, or you want to redefine a city transport system with a subway, like for example Madrid did, if you want to change the way transportation is done with robotaxis, if you want to change the way the car industry is functioning with electric cars, I guess you can see where this is going, right? The parallels between large projects and wealth creation are there. And the answer to the question, why do some projects fail and others don't, actually is incredibly human. It's all about decision making. It's all about strategy. And the fundamental strategy is think slow, take your time, and then act fast. Think slow, act fast. What does that mean? That means think through the possible scenarios that you're going to go through while you're building your business or project. At this point, we can use project and business synonymously. So think through what you need to achieve at what point and what are the pain points that could derail your project. For example, what could lead to large lawsuits? Anticipate that and indemnify yourself with the community that you're building the project in. Most importantly, though, iterate. And the way you iterate is you have to build a business that can scale in small steps, and you want to minimize the valley of doom, which is that part of the business when you're vulnerable and when bad things can happen and derail your business to the point where you can fail. Once you pass the valley of doom, you can fail. I mean, you're going to fail at some point in certain ways all the time. In other words, things can go wrong. And you're going to have to pivot. You're going to have to change strategy. But you don't want to have to do this at a point where you can go bankrupt. You can't bet your farm on a business in such a way that if something goes wrong, you're done. So you want to pass the valley of doom. You want to build a business that can scale. Let's say you want to go to Mars. That's fine. That's a big goal. But you want to do it in a piecemeal way so you can iterate. And what that means is you have to have sustainable cash flow early on. In other words, you have to have a launch business. You have to have Starlink. And then you have to have a larger launch business, potentially civil transportation with, orbital travel, and so on until you get to the point where you can go to Mars. Well, I'm using Elon Musk here as an example because actually the professor talks about Elon Musk as an example of somebody who builds his businesses exactly like that. And we've spoken about this before. One of the geniuses about Elon Musk is, for example, when he built the Gigafactory in Reno, he built back then 50 gigawatt hour, 50 gigawatt hour battery capacity factory, which was by far the largest in the world. And he was told by construction companies and experts and consultants, it will take 5 years to build this. Well, 5 years I don't have that kind of time. So what he had to do is he had to build a modular system where he can start producing batteries and launching them and generate revenue very fast. That happened through power walls and things like that, and then go from there and build a larger and larger and larger, iterate also around the modules to make the modules more efficient. So he needs less modules than anticipated. In other words, the 50 gigawatt hour battery was constructed earlier than expected, at a higher efficiency than expected, a lower cost per per watt than expected. And that because he was able to iterate. This is opposed to 0-1 projects where you wait 10 years in order to either succeed or not succeed. We've spoken about this before, for example, why we're against things like nuclear energy and fusion energy and things like that, because those are 0-1 projects. Either it works or it doesn't, and we have to wait 10 years until we know, and that's way too long. And we don't have time to iterate, we don't have time to error correct, and therefore it's usually a bad outcome. In this particular book that the whole interview was about, it's called How Big Projects Get Done. He talks about how a lot of projects go wrong, and the ones who don't go wrong are exactly those where you think slow and act fast, and you have modular design of the business and a modular execution of the business. Very important. Probably one of the most important aspects of building large businesses and large wealth-creating businesses is to have a modular approach. Modular approach means sort of a Lego block approach. And each Lego block builds its own cash flow, its own sustainable business, and then they start compounding. And again, once you have a bunch of Legos that are sustainable on their own, you can pivot. You don't rely on the whole thing working in one shot. You can pivot. You can have, let's say, in the case of Tesla, you have Dojo, which was building on the electric car business and the FSD, but changing strategy doesn't mean that the whole business is failing. It's just that Dojo is failing and it's going to be replaced with a different chip strategy, but everything else is still working. So to summarize, I think this idea of how to build large businesses and using the parallels with large projects is, in my opinion, a pivotal idea. It's absolutely crucial. Highly recommend this interview. It's links in the show note. I will read the book. I haven't read the book, but I can see already how important some of these insights are, even before I read the book, and I'm sure the book is amazing. It's based on data. There's a lot of scientific work here too. He's showing scientifically why projects work, why they don't work. He's showing some statistical references. But fundamentally, I think the takeaway here is that in order to succeed at large-scale projects, you need to have a modular approach, a Lego approach, a self-sustaining modular approach. You have to have the ability to iterate and pivot without giving up the whole business. You have to be able to scale. Wars are won with logistics, and that means that you have to have a logistics strategy for the small Lego blocks and then be able to modularize this up to a very large scale. Also, I guess fundamentally the question, for example, when it comes to Tesla is, okay, what does that mean in terms of, let's say, launching the robotaxi service? It means that we have built now a system that is called FSD, which was built on a self-driving car, which was built on an electric car, which was built throughout millions and millions of miles driven by customers who were either paying for it or at least weren't paid to do it. With that video data, the model could be trained. Now it can be bootstrapped. It can train itself now using some of the latest developments in AI and some of the ideas of the era of experience. And therefore, we can now build a system that can fundamentally change how traffic is organized in the world and therefore also create a large business. Thank you.